In today's interconnected world, a single nation's policy can shake the global economy. That's exactly what happened when former President Donald Trump launched a sweeping trade war using tariffs as his weapon of choice. The plan imposed broad taxes on imports, aiming to revive American industry and force other countries to change. Tariffs soared up to 25% on some goods, and a staggering 145% on imports from China. Supporters claimed this would protect American jobs and fix the trade deficit. Critics warned it would backfire, raising prices and hurting businesses. The world watched as allies became rivals and global supply chains were thrown into chaos. The impact was immediate. European workers faced uncertainty. American families saw costs rise and businesses scrambled to adapt. Today, we're still living with the aftershocks of this high-stakes gamble. Did the tariffs work, or did they unleash more harm than good?
To grasp the shockwaves, we need to understand the strategy. Trump's America First approach marked a sharp break from decades of US support for global free trade. Instead of cooperation, trade became a zero-sum game. America versus the world. Tariffs became the main tool, targeting not just adversaries, but also allies like Canada and the EU. Unlike previous targeted tariffs, these were broad, aggressive, and often justified on national security grounds. The message: the old rules were gone, replaced by raw economic power and unpredictable negotiation. This left businesses and governments worldwide scrambling to adapt to a new, confrontational US trade doctrine. The global trading system's stability was suddenly in question. When US tariffs hit, Europe was a primary target. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and the threat of more on cars sent shockwaves through the EU. Studies predicted a modest GDP hit for Europe, but a bigger one for the US, showing tariffs often hurt the country imposing them most. The pain wasn't evenly spread. Ireland's pharma sector and Italy's auto industry were especially vulnerable. Policymakers faced not just an external dispute, but internal fallout, as jobs and revenues in key sectors came under threat. The tariffs weren't just numbers. They threatened real communities and forced Europe to act. The EU had to find ways to protect its most exposed industries and citizens. Europe didn't sit back, it fought back. The EU retaliated with tariffs on iconic American goods, targeting political pressure points. At home, governments used fiscal stimulus and support for affected industries to cushion the blow. The EU also accelerated new trade deals with countries like Canada and Japan, reducing reliance on the US market. Targeted aid helped workers and companies in the hardest-hit sectors adapt. This multi-pronged response, retaliation, support, and global outreach helped Europe weather the storm. The EU's resilience became a model for managing trade shocks. The trade war's most direct impact: higher prices for American families. Tariffs acted as a tax on consumers. Companies paid the tariffs, then passed the cost on. Studies showed nearly all the extra cost landed on Americans, not foreign exporters. Everyday goods, from washing machines to clothing, became more expensive. For a typical family, tariffs meant over $1,700 a year in added expenses. Domestic producers also raised prices, knowing foreign competition was hobbled. The result? Americans paid more for both imports and US-made goods. The promise of making America richer turned into a reality of higher living costs. American businesses felt the squeeze too. Modern manufacturing relies on global supply chains. Tariffs raised costs for raw materials and components. Instead of protecting jobs, many companies faced layoffs, delayed investments, or even moved operations abroad. Studies found job losses in industries using tariffed goods often outweighed gains in protected sectors. Small businesses, lacking resources to adapt, were hit hardest. The broad tariffs created uncertainty and rising costs across agriculture, tech, construction, and retail. The very policy meant to shield US industry became a new obstacle. Tariffs ended up hurting the backbone of the American economy. Did tariffs bring back jobs or cut the trade deficit? The data says no. Manufacturing jobs didn't surge. Any gains in protected sectors were offset by losses elsewhere. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries hit US exports, especially in agriculture. The net effect: more job losses than gains. The trade deficit? It actually grew, partly because tariffs strengthened the dollar, making US exports pricier. Companies found ways around tariffs, shifting production to other countries instead of bringing it home. Trade diversion meant imports kept flowing, just from new sources. The two main promises of the tariff strategy went unfulfilled. Instead of a manufacturing revival, the US saw higher costs and a wider trade gap. The grand strategy failed to deliver its core goals. China was the main target, hit with the highest tariffs. The goal forced Beijing to change its economic model and address US grievances over intellectual property and subsidies. The result? Global supply chains were thrown into chaos, and American companies had to rethink their operations. China retaliated, targeting key US exports and escalating the conflict. Fears of Chinese goods flooding Europe proved overblown, as the EU had tools to defend its markets. Even after a change in US leadership, many tariffs on China remained. The bipartisan consensus: a tougher line on China is here to stay. The tariff war was just one chapter in a larger, ongoing US-China rivalry over technology and influence. The economic conflict is likely to shape global relations for years to come. Trump's tariff era forced the world to rethink trade. The evidence is clear. Protectionism raised costs, failed to deliver promised benefits, and strained alliances. The EU's resilience, retaliation, support, and new trade deals helped it weather the storm. The US-China rivalry now defines global trade, with tariffs remaining a bipartisan tool. The world is moving toward fragmented, security-driven trade policies. The lesson: economic walls are hard to build and often hurt those they're meant to protect. The challenge ahead is to learn from this era and decide: retreat behind barriers or build a fairer, more resilient global system. The debate isn't over. Your voice will help shape what comes next.